where you can put it on your browser, and every time you are looking on PubMed of a specific publication, you get the comments of the people. So it's a place where the peers are also commenting about the data that we're generating in specific publication, and you can have you can look at the paper and say, oh, there was a lot of discussion around this in PubPeer, and this will be popped up on your screen if you use this add-on. So that's also a way to be a bit more careful on the science that is, yes, thank you, Georgina, the science that is being produced. Okay, so that's a good idea, a good overview already of some of the metrics available, how to use them, and some also tools to look at and tips on the journal impact factor. So yes, we are around 30 for the big guys, and I had prepared these slides 2-3 years ago, but they had reduced. Science and Nature particularly were more around 30-40 back in 2018, whereas Toxicology in Vitro and ALTERTOX are stable. Maybe it's, I don't know really how to explain them, why they decrease. Maybe it's because there is the number of publishers has exploded, and so you don't always go for Nature or Science, and you may try also to go elsewhere. I don't know if, Georgina, you have particular thoughts on that, or we can just move on.
I mean, it probably could highly be due to some shifts towards open access, increases in numbers of publications. So of course, the more you publish in a given year, if your journal grows a lot, then you will see a drop in impact factor because you're still measuring it against citations in the 2 previous years. So there would still be a drop there if you have large growth in a journal. And that's why it's such an easy metric to manipulate, because you can have a year where you publish less and you publish articles with more citations, and then you're able to influence the journal impact factor.
Okay, so I think I want to move on to another part of our Scientometrics, which is the business models of the publishers, because there is a business model around it. And the Elseviers and others are not doing it for the beauty of science only. Could you maybe explain us the different business models for the publishers, and how, what is the status? I think there are 3, 4.
Yeah, I'll go over the main ones because there are more. But one thing I would maybe incite everyone to do is, when you are going to publish in any given journal, checking whether their business model is transparent. So are they charging article processing fees? Are they a traditional subscription journal where you will not retain your license for your ownership basically over your article? Check that this is transparent, and if not, then there's probably someone in the editorial staff who you can ask as to what will be the situation with your article. Will you still be able to share this openly, or is it kept behind a paywall? So we have traditional publishers who in many cases will not charge for publication. However, these are articles that, if accepted, will be put in an embargo period, and they will basically be only available upon subscription. So this is only available for those who pay those publishers to access all of these articles.
So like that's typically the university having a subscription for many different journals, and when you are inside the university or a company, you have access to the catalog.
Exactly. If you're lucky and your university can afford these amounts, then you will have access. I think most of us here in the call are very privileged, and we probably do have access to most subscription journals, but there are many universities worldwide where they cannot afford the cost, because it is millions that the libraries have to pay.
So that's one.
That's one, traditional. And then we have, on the other side, we have open access. So this, within open access, you have different business models. And I would say here, again, check that this is transparent. That's why Sci-Hub exists, exactly.
But Sci-Hub is regularly, Sci-Hub is normally a place where you can download publication. But I thought that it was getting closed here and there regularly.
I'm sure they're trying. I'm sure they're trying.
Katya has a question maybe, but I don't know if it's related. You can have a look at Georgina. And this question is interesting, given that I am not a real academic. I would appreciate if someone explained how this works and whether this is worth using. How does it work with copyright?
Whether it's worth using Sci-Hub. I think this is specific towards Sci-Hub. So Sci-Hub is illegal. This is not, let's just clarify that it's not legal. However, I'm sure we've all in our lives also downloaded music, which is also illegal. So this of course, yes, does help potentially accessing some articles, but you rely, hi Katya, you rely on people uploading those articles. So likely there is a chance that there are some that you can't access. Exactly. That's why we have VPNs. So open access on the other side, free open access and for all articles that are accepted and publishes, and authors retain copyright. So they have a CC BY license for dissemination of their article and any of its contents. Within open access, however, there are different models. There's green open access, there's bronze open access, and gold open access. For green,
just to be sure, so the open access, the fee is not anymore the library paying, it's the writer paying.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll go into that. So for each of these models in open access, the journal itself will have its own publishing fees. And this is where I ask that you check whether these are transparent. How is this fee justified? So how do they break down the cost regarding editorial services, paying for the license, the copyright license, indexing of your article into different platforms, and any other investment they're making towards the community. So how much of that cost is actually being reintroduced into supporting maybe different research communities.
So open access doesn't mean it's free.
Exactly. Open access doesn't mean it's free, but depending on the publisher, it could mean that this is for profit and it's not, let's say, in a mission trying to support different research communities, or they have a transparent APC, article processing charges model, which you should be able to access on their website.
Okay. We mentioned a few times before bioRxiv when it comes to science. Can you tell us or explain more what bioRxiv means, and why is it a game changer compared to the others?
I mean, it's a repository. So it's somewhere where you can deposit your articles. And again, I'm only expressing my own opinions, but I think that depositing an article into bioRxiv, for example, is a great way to start getting your research out there, to get feedback from the community, because anyone can comment on the article there. So you can even improve your article, you can work on it, it will be updated. And then most open access publishers and some traditional publishers will allow you to automatically transfer that that print from the repository to their journal for peer review. The positives is that your research is made freely, widely available immediately. You can still use this as a reference. It still can be referenced because it does have a DOI number. And those references will then be summed to your final article if accepted for publication.
Can you define the DOI?
An identifier, so a number that identifies your article.
Unique identity of the, yeah. And you mentioned with COVID and that there was a lot of, and that is where we also had this discussion regarding retraction. So since it's a preprint, it was not peer reviewed also. I think that's where also that's the main difference. It's not peer reviewed, but it's
and
out.
the disclaimer is there on the website as soon as you enter. I mean, it does disclaim that none of those articles are peer reviewed. So as soon as the article goes through peer review, this will be updated in bioarchives, and it will be noted that it has gone through peer review in external.
Because I think that was one of the issues during the COVID time, where everyone was producing knowledge and we really needed as much information as possible to develop the vaccine. There was a bunch of information overload, and some of the information was not relevant and had to be retracted, and is still being quoted until now, although we know that with the preprint, it was maybe not the right quality. So that would be maybe a limitation.
Of course, but maybe I can add it to Sophia's last comment, which says, of course, the publisher needs to make money. Yes, it's a business, but can you comment on the fact that the key activity of publication process is done for free? Reviewers, editors, all of this, I'm very familiar. Coming myself from academia and then working in a publisher, I know that this is an extra activity, extra task, and what are the benefits for scientists to editing, reviewing for free? So if we can, well, bioarchives, for example, is a model where everything is free, no publisher is making a profit, and there is the option for people to comment, act as reviewers, act as editors, and comment. It's not going through a peer review process, but there can be a community discussion there. Mm-hmm. What does a publisher offer? It offers a platform. It offers somewhere where you can sift and maybe also funnel through the huge number of publications, as we see in bioarchives that are deposited there, at least putting some filter onto what actually should proceed to peer review. So I do see value in having a business that does provide that as a service. However, the discussion around how scientists are, offering their time for free to handle is not sustainable. It's not something that, there are already huge difficulties to find reviewers, and everyone doesn't have time with the huge number of articles that are submitted. This is something that should keep on being discussed, and especially by the scientists in the field.
And when we were preparing the lunch talk, you told me that there was even discussion to make the reviewer paid, but even that didn't have so much success.
So there are publishers that do offer either payment or discounts. So if a reviewer reviews a certain number of articles, they receive a discount to then publish in that same journal. And yes, this works to a certain extent. And on one side, we have to be careful that people would not abuse this model and then not do a quality review, but try to get as many as possible to then obtain a discount. There are different ways to try to measure this, but I'd say that up until now, it hasn't proven to be as successful. It maybe will get people to review lower quality manuscripts, but high quality manuscripts, we find that scientists do want to review them. I mean, you do want to be involved and learn from that manuscript and be reading the latest research from your community.
Should we ask the scientists to have a quota, like part of their activities, saying, okay, you want to benefit the community? I don't know, just dropping this. Georgia.
It's a huge discussion.
Discussion. I don't think we'll find the solution, but it's indeed.
No, we need to find the solution. We need to find the solution. If we want science to be open and of high quality, we need to find a solution to this. Okay, so Georgia says, if manuscripts are available in any public repository, could editors consider the submitted manuscript as not novel anymore? No. For traditional publishers, perhaps, if they are focusing on novelty. However, any open access publisher will not focus this on novelty. No.
The other
At
question?
least their editorial board should be educated to not reject this based on novelty and see that it has been already successful in bioarchives. Maybe there are positive comments from the community. Then this should not be a blocker. It would be useful to acknowledge the reviewer's work on accepted manuscripts. Yes, Giorgio, this is now becoming more and more common.
We have the name of the
Nature,
reviewer.
exactly, and Nature actually will make the reviewer reports public if the authors agree to this. And again, this is one way that that they can acknowledge the
But because
reviewer's
also,
work.
I think it could be also new metrics. Like, okay, we see you spend quite some time to do reviews. Sometimes it's on the edge of what your expertise is. It's worth being gratified also maybe with another metrics, another one. But the fact that it's transparent is also because in the comments of reviewers can be super harsh.
Exactly. Yeah.
And disagreeable, and because you are anonymous, you can say whatever you want.
This is another thing that we discussed is how transparent should the review process be. And, you know, my opinion is that it should be fully transparent. The reviewers should act professionally in a way that their review comments could be made publicly available. Because it doesn't help anyone, right? If a reviewer is rude to authors, I mean, it doesn't help anyone.
No, I don't think it should be seen as a conversation and not as a
exactly
as grading a paper. I mean, there is a Tumblr account on reviewers' comments. So, guys, if you want to have a look and see how harsh it can be or disagreeable, be my guest. There is just one around this. We drifted a bit. I mean, we did not drift. We talked about the peer review, and it was also part of on our to-do list today. But I want to go back a bit to what we had also as a business model. For me, there are two that I'd like you at least to comment. The Open Science at the European Commission.
Planes, yeah. So Planes,
exactly.
Yeah. Planes, Coalition S also, focusing on that from 2021 onwards, so this year. However, it was slightly delayed. Scientific publications that result from research that is funded by public grants must be published in compliant open access journals or platforms. And there is a tool where you can check whether a journal is Planes compliant. Also, I will comment that there have been some latest advances in June 2020. Nature was commenting that it still will be allowed to publish in traditional publishers as long as the authors retain copyright over an author-approved version. For example, if they've deposited in bioarchives, they will still retain that copyright and they would still be able to disseminate this version. So there are some loopholes in achieving this. And what it did was shift let's say the publishing landscape completely, because even traditional publishers are now launching their own open access journals. However, at very high costs, some up to $8,000 US to publish them.
I'm smiling because I'm looking at Costanza's comment. Some years ago, I had to reject a paper from a friend. It's good that reviewers are anonymous.
Yes, it's good that reviewers are anonymous, for sure. So at least single blind, if not double blind peer review. And what we were discussing before is if an article is accepted, especially if it's accepted, then the reviewer name should be acknowledged and the reports should be made available.
Okay.
Yes, it's important to have transparency in peer review, but also that there is some single or double blind initial analysis.
Now, Georgina, I'd like to talk about the dark side of metrics. I mean, we have covered it a bit with people who manipulate, but I want to dig where it hurts. So I have a small charade for you guys again. So
I think the first question we had is how many of you, maybe you can just add a
yes,
note
please.
on the chat, how many of you have been a target of predatory journals or thought you had been a target or went too far and you ended up submitting?
And you were.
You were.
So guys, just say yes. Me or no shame. I mean, I receive
no one.
every day.
Maybe no one then.
Yeah,
like
no
maybe
one.
they're not. I get an average of 5 requirements per day.
Not bad. Weekly emails and
Wow.
conferences. Indeed. That's the every week. Yeah. Me too. Yeah, weekly.
So this, saying that you got it weekly or daily is, I would say, what harms the open access movement so much, because if any email from an open access publisher is buried under all of these other requests, it just means that, you will probably ignore all the requests.
Yeah, it lowers the opinion of the people regarding this way of working or this business model.
So maybe you can add in the chat how you identified this as a predatory publisher or a conference organizer. What were you? Yeah, how do you identify them? And Francois, do you want to share your?
Yeah, I have one or two stories around this that can illustrate the idea of how predatory journals were even spotted. There is this student or PhD student who decided to generate with artificial intelligence paper because he was constantly receiving a request for that. So they generated it and they put this affiliation as an hint. They were the Center for Research in Applied Phrenology. So if you took the acronym, it's C for center, research R, applied A, phrenology P. So that means crap. and the publisher didn't notice. The predatory journal didn't notice. He was just so happy to have a paper and just said, okay, here is your fee. And then it was spotted, put on New Scientist and Nature. And indeed, there are a few there are a few ways to look at it. Olivier has a good one. In general, they ask you a field that has nothing to do with what you are doing. And they still ask you to submit. There is the bills list from Johannes. There is also a list of predatory journals. And maybe, Georgina, you want to comment?
Yeah, I was just asking Maren which list they use, because there are a couple of lists, and also I will mention here because I think it's very important for the discussion. For example, Frontiers is listed as a predatory journal in Bale's list. Does Frontiers email people to submit to journal? No. Does Frontiers email people to collaborate and to work with the journal? Yes. So there's one reason why it was included in Bale's list, and it's because they were emailing people. This is even prior to me joining. But there are very non-transparent criteria in Bale's list. So I would say that it's about 60% accurate, but there are many journals in there that are not predatory publishers. They are open access publishers, and therefore should not be included in this list, which is discredited now.
Go ahead.
Simply Googling the journal. Yeah, exactly. So yes, Googling the journal, checking that the journal has its own web page, that it has other articles published within the journal. You can also, I suggest is looking at the editorial board. So is there anyone on the editorial board that you would recognize as someone in your field? Also checking that the articles that are published in that journal are indexed in Scopus or other
Yes.
indexation.
Because also with the board of editor, we know that sometimes predatory journals don't ask the editors, and they put names of editors and they are not aware of it. So that's
exactly. So it can't be the only one. Exactly. Yes.
So that could be biased. Sonia also suggests to look at the impact factor of the journal.
Yes, I guess if they haven't achieved too many publications, they will never really achieve an impact factor, so they wouldn't have an impact factor. You can check that they have transparency on publishing fees. So are there fees, and what, again, the transparency on these fees within their webpage, the transparency on peer review. So if the article is not going through any peer review, then this is an issue. Are they a member of COPE? So this is also publication ethics. And then also, again, just the list of editors, if there's anyone you can check with that person as to whether, it'll also help discredit or remove this potential predatory journal if that person's name is being listed without their consent. Yes, I agree, Constanza. Yes, I completely agree.
I'm aware that I may delete important requests, but messages from predatory journals are too many and we have no time to go into details. Yes, there is also, I don't know if you mentioned it, the directory of open access journal.
Yes, DOAJ.
DOAJ, yes.
So specifically, if it's an open access journal, you can check that that the journal is listed there. I've provided the links that Francois will send to you, and that again that the articles are indexed in Scopus and
yes, indeed, that's the point. Have you read any article in the journal before? That's also one point. So you have this predatory journal, you have the tips maybe to take in consideration. Another dark side of metric that I kind of like, because we tend to do it all without noticing it, it's self-citation. Can you tell me more, Georgina, about self-citation?
I can only say that I think this was only
what is it?
is only being discussed. Oh, what is it? So citing your own papers in your own manuscript, so oversighting, or also as a reviewer asking authors to cite your articles in their work without sufficient necessity for that citation. So I think that this is something that didn't really come to light until maybe only 5-10 years ago. And I would say that one of the tips I can give is, again, if you can be involved in a transparent peer review process, this will help this from not happening. So it will avoid this. Because there are journals, at least Frontiers, for example, where they check if a reviewer is asking authors to cite their articles, they actually check that these articles are relevant to the manuscript in question to avoid self-citation incentives.
They even suggest, so it's based on an analysis made 2-3 years ago, self-citation farm also, when it's really put as more or less as a system between a board of editors saying, okay, you cite me, I cite you. But it appears with the looking at the metrics and the database, and some people are suggesting also to have another metric. So I don't know how many metrics we'll need, but one is the S metric, so the self-citation metric. So if you spend your time citing yourself, well, maybe that's you are totally skewing your H index. Thank you so much, Georgina, and I think we will close here.